Thank you, Mike. Good evening. Welcome to the Bennington Select Board meeting. It's holiday Monday, October 8th, 2018. For those of you that do get to celebrate, we're convening here at the Bennington Fire Facility. I'm Tom Jacobs and have the privilege and pleasure of chairing the meeting. I would like to just have my colleagues introduce themselves, maybe starting with our Nancy Lively, our esteemed reporter. Thank you, Nancy.
Nancy Lively, Secretary.
Good evening, Chad Gordon.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, I'm Donald Campbell.
Good evening, I'm Jim Carroll.
Good evening, Carson Thurber.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Jean Connor.
And I'm Stuart Hurd, Town Manager.
And those of you who have not been able to come, but you'll be seeing on CAT TV next couple days, right? Mike, when will it be broadcast? Great, good. We always start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Jeannie, could you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
As we always start or deal with our consent agenda, we have been in receipt of the minutes from our September 24th meeting, as well as the warrants. I will get to a resolution after the consent agenda is considered. Could I get a motion for the minutes and the warrants to be accepted as part of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Abstaining.
Any discussion? Any changes, additions, deletions that are warranted?
We did one name correction.
Good.
I had one correction, which I wasn't here for the thing, and he may have said it wrong, but the purchase price for Prospect Mountain was $900,000, not $950,000. So I don't know if that's a correction to the minutes or just a factual correction, but
What is the actual math?
the actual purchase price was $900,000.
Yeah, that's what I recall too, but maybe from another session. With that correction, because it should reflect the
That's
actual.
line 66, Nancy.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I was absent. I tried to say it, but you were real quick on the draw.
Okay, great. Those that were present and are able to agree to the consent agenda as modified, signify by aye.
Aye.
And then we do have Carson, who is not going to be voting on the minutes because of his absence on the 24th. Good. Public comment, we normally circulate that opportunity.
Do you want to do this later?
We haven't got any sign-ups?
No sign-ups tonight.
Okay. Are there any folks that didn't get a chance, that came in after we got started, that would like to comment relative to our citizen comment period? I'm not bothered by that in the slightest detail. Okay, please. You're going to have to go up and signify your name, address, and your question.
Rose Telford. I just had a question about the rec center. Has anybody been hired to take it over, or has any of that been settled yet?
Good question, Rose. Maybe Stuart can bring us up to date on what the...
No, we've not replaced Tracy Knights at this time. Chris Barbagallo is acting on an interim basis, running the center, but the board has charged the staff with taking a look at a complete reorganization and in a sense an upgrading of the center and its programs, and we are in the process of doing that. It includes a look at the YMCA and whether or not they would make a proposal to take over and operate the center. And it also will be looking at whether or not, with increased staff and a little increased presence, we can make the center a better place.
Is there going to be an increased staff at the senior center?
That is being considered for the budget process, yes.
All right, that's all I want to know.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the next item on our agenda Actually, our first business item deals with the Bennington Tennis Center and a request for a classroom structure to be added to that area. Is there someone who would like to speak to that? Yes. Good evening. It's good to see you again. After a successful summer, very successful. Before you get going, how many students participated in your program?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Just I'm sorry, just do introductions. I'm jumping the gun. Go ahead, introduce yourselves and your positions. Thanks.
Hi, yes, I'm Seth Gabriel. I manage the Bennington Tennis Center.
Great.
I'm Sandy Foster, and I'm helping out with the educational piece
Great.
of the tennis center.
The summer was very much a success.
It really was. We had a wonderful program.
How many tennis scholars did you attend to, Sandy?
About 25, an average of 25 each week.
Wow.
And next year we hope to expand that.
Great. The purpose tonight is not to deal with another court, but to deal with an extension on the facility, right? Could you maybe indicate to the board what you're looking for in the context of supporting that project?
Absolutely. Our nonprofit that we've been working with is called NJTL, which is National Junior Tennis and Learning. We obviously have the tennis covered inside our dome, but as we start to implement our educational program, we're finding very quickly that being inside the dome when other tennis is taking place, it is not very conducive for kids to learn. So we feel it's necessary to take our program to the next level, is to have a separate, dedicated space for our educational program.
And you submitted to the town your plans for that?
Yes, we have.
And I think part of the reason we're having this discussion is because it's on town lease property?
Absolutely.
Okay. Why don't you just give us an idea of what the plan is relative to the side? By the way, has this gone through the board? The
DRB?
DRB, thank you.
No, it has not. The first thing was just to secure our approval, which you folks.
Okay.
That's all we're here tonight. If you folks are fine with it, then we'll go ahead and take care of that.
Yeah, so basically what we're looking to do within our, if you're familiar with the facility at all, it's enclosed in a large fence. Right behind our building, bathrooms, and shower room, we have a pretty open space right behind there. That's where we would like to put our classroom. So it's within the existing print of where we are already. And we feel that would really add to our program and give the kids a real great space to do some education.
Will it be a full 12-season facility?
It will, yeah. I mean, we're really, our main concept right now is to do it in a yurt. They have very nice heating and cooling systems that could be retrofitted into these very easily. It's going to be insulated, so it's going to be nice and comfortable in the wintertime. And it's going to hopefully do its purpose if allowed.
Do you have any other questions of the...
What's the,
Go ahead.
did
Please,
you
no,
want to
no,
start?
No.
I was just curious what the square footage was.
It's a 30-foot diameter, which gives us about 700 square feet.
And I'm assuming there's a bathroom and...
We actually already have pre-existing bathrooms right around the corner. So what we're looking to do is kind of build like a little boardwalk onto a deck area, and then they can access it right by the entrance to the tennis courts.
It sounds great, and you probably could use it for other things too, parties or...
The more we think about it, the more we say, oh, this can really... But I mean, its primary purpose is really for our educational program. But
Sure.
yes.
That's great. Yep, that's it. That's all the questions I have.
No questions.
Jim?
I have a couple. So we have two maps here. One has a yurt and one has a square box. What's the difference there?
We wanted to make sure that if the yurt was just unacceptable, that we had a backup drawing when we went through our architectural. We didn't want to have to go back to somebody. Ideally, we'd like a yurt.
If we're too conservative to have a yurt, you have to put something square, or?
We're keeping our options open.
I think the yurt sounds great. It would be 4-season, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So that, just from a gritty perspective, what would the deal be with the town in terms of whose cost is it, whose liability is it, whose maintenance is it, what happens if you leave, what happens if something happens there? Is there anything different about this yurt than would be about the tennis bubble?
No, we would assume all responsibilities as we have been since the beginning.
Okay.
Stu, would you anticipate that there would be an amendment to the existing lease arrangement that would speak to this?
Well, I'd have to take a look at the lease, the details of the lease. Because they're within the footprint they're already leasing, I'm not sure that it'll require a major change in the lease if it does require any change at all.
Gene?
So is the yurt technically a temporary structure then? I mean, it is something that can be removed?
It can be removed
Yeah.
very easily. Yeah, that's part of the appeal to it, to be
Yeah,
quite honest.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like it too. So how many kids do you plan on
The way we run our program, we try to bring about 24 to 30 kids in at once. 2 courts of kids playing tennis, 1 court doing education, and then just rotate them through.
Yep.
So ideally, we're looking between 10, 8, 12 kids in the yurt at a time.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
I have no questions.
So Stuart, do you have any trepidation or any downside for the town on this? It seems like a win-win where they're bringing the money and they're bringing the asset, and it's going to make the community better and stronger. Is there anything we're missing?
No, Donald, nothing at all.
That's a really
Nothing
good
hidden in the
setup.
fine print?
I'm not going to try to go up against that, no, sir.
I do have one question. What is a yurt?
A yurt, and I actually have a picture for you. It's not a great picture, but we can share it with you.
It's European.
The round.
You see it ski.
It's like one of those sweat chambers.
Sweat chambers.
Yes, it could be.
Is there going to be an issue relative to if we don't have any real objections to the structure as to which would be appealing to the design review folks?
Given the size of the structure, we may be able to permit it administratively. I have to look at the details. It is outside of the floodplain and the FEH and the river border, so there shouldn't be any issues, even if it does have to go to the full board.
Great.
Looks like an easy one.
It's so easy, we ask extra questions that probably don't even rise to the level of
Zerwas.
materiality. Go ahead, Zerwa.
May I just get a bit, maybe an overview of what some of the time will be, just so that as I'm liaising with potential partners about after-school caring programs, that we can make sure that there's no duplication.
Okay. Great.
Find out afterwards.
The question is, are there other uses for after-school programs, et cetera, not directly related to the facilities?
We've always been open to partnering with the community, and it doesn't seem like that's out of the realm of communication, no.
Thanks.
Can I just have a quick, maybe meeting separately, just
Sure.
a synopsis of what this will be and stuff, just so that I know, this need is being served and there are other needs that I can work on.
Absolutely.
Good. Let's do.
What would you like? Would you like a motion on
I
this?
guess
or-
the question is, it's a proposal, and I guess why don't we have a motion to accept the proposal subject to final design, because I don't think we've said we want either one, and we'll leave it to the applicant and the management to deal with that. Could we have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Okay. Further discussion on this proposal? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
You've got unanimous consent. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Steph.
you.
We'll see you in the yurt.
You're kidding.
You couldn't resist, could you?
Now that you know it, you're on. Okay. Bennington Redevelopment Group, been kind enough to provide a update. Thank you, gentlemen. We've been looking forward to your presence.
Great.
And I hope at the end of the discussion, we continue to look forward.
I'll let Bob get set up.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you very much for having us this evening. I'm Bill Colvin. I'm the Assistant Director of the Bennington County Regional Planning Commission, the Director of the Bennington County Industrial Corporation, and for this evening, a representative of the Bennington Redevelopment Group. I have with me Bob Stevens. Bob is a principal in M&S Development. M&S is the developer working with the Bennington Redevelopment Group and a member of the Bennington Redevelopment Group. Bob also is the principal in Stevens & Associates, which is an architectural and engineering firm based in Brattleboro, who has done a significant amount of the work on the project. So thanks very much for having us this evening. We wanted to come give kind of a brief update regarding the Putnam project, the status. We know that a lot of interest out in the community, a lot of people wondering what's going on, when's it going to happen, when are we breaking ground. So hopefully we'll be able to address a number of those questions this evening, but we wanted to provide plenty of time as well for Q&A from the board.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Sure. So, the exciting news, last Thursday, we officially began closing calls with the funders and investors in the Putnam redevelopment project. So, 17 funding sources coming into the project. If you count the equity as a single source, preferred equity as a single source, and all of the people that make those up, not counting them individually, 17 different sources on the sources and uses budget. Many of those, including the community development entities that are providing new market tax credits, the banking institutions that are buying those tax credits, the national accounting firms who are overseeing the structure of this deal, and the inherent attorneys that come with them are part of the closing calls. The important component of that fact is roughly when you begin the closing call process, you're about 8 weeks out from a closing of the financial closing of the deal, which, as we know, with regard to the Putnam project, means the day we close is the day that we commence construction, with one important caveat, which I'll talk about in just a second. So, roughly December 1st is the target date at this point, somewhere early December 1st, early in December, to complete the financial closing and formally begin construction on the Putnam redevelopment project. Now I say with a caveat because if you've been in or around the site in the last couple of weeks, you'll notice a fair amount of activity. The redevelopment group has authorized secured funding at risk and authorized the beginning of the environmental remediation work on the site. So specifically at this point, most of the asbestos remediation work from the former Greenberg hardware store to the tune of about $125,000 is nearly complete. So the asbestos tile and other asbestos containing materials will be removed from there within the next couple of days. That work's been ongoing for about 3 weeks. The other work that will happen prior, with regard to remediation, that will happen prior to the closing is the removal of a 10,000-gallon underground fuel storage tank behind the Hotel Putnam. So for those of you who may have been by the Bennington brush site, when that tank was pulled this summer, you're looking at something roughly the size of a small submarine, which will be on the back of a flatbed truck there. We will also be excavating about 634 cubic yards of PAH soils. So those are soils impacted by polyaromatic hydrocarbons, so partially burnt hydrocarbons. Very common in urban settings. Basically, it's exhaust fumes go up, they get burnt, they come back down to the ground, and they form PAHs. So we'll be excavating those, storing them under one of the storage sheds on the Greenberg site, and then burying them at a safe depth underground for phase 2. That's been subject to the corrective action plan, which has been approved by the Environmental Protection Agency, the State of Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and will be overseen by Vermont DEC in conjunction with a qualified contractor approved by them to do that work and hired by the redevelopment group. So all of that work to the tune of nearly $700,000 is ongoing and will be completed and must be completed before the financial closing. As I think you're all aware, the Bennington County Industrial Corporation is the owner in name of those properties at this point. We have been able to secure some grant funding and a bit of low-interest loan funding as a result of BCIC's ownership. The environmental work, which has secured those, the subject of those funds, needs to be completed before BCIC transfers the property to the Bennington redevelopment group. So that's why this significant environmental remediation work is happening in advance of the closing.
Bill, did you mention the demo?
No, well, yeah, but we certainly will, because that's the other part that will get really exciting, is the demolition of the Greenberg's hardware store. So we're anticipating at this point that to begin first part of November and take roughly a month, and will be done again in advance of the closing. So I think the community who is not listening in tonight, not getting an idea of kind of the timeline of the closing, I think will be pretty excited when they start seeing that building come down. So
We were talking about scaffolding, but I think I'd be just as happy to see the building come down.
Big trucks.
Right.
Yeah, we've gotten to the point in the project that a wrecking ball showing up is an exciting, exciting occurrence here. So, provided we're demolishing the right building. So that's the update on remediation. We're going to have Bob talk about the plan for housing throughout the site. You have 3 handouts in your package. One is that pre-closing remediation kind of checklist and a description of what I just walked through. The second is this updated kind of site plan along with the phasing of that. So it shows the phase 1 buildings and then site for future housing. And then the third handout in your packet there is a piece we put together that shows the significant economic impact of the housing that would be created, 105 housing units created as part of phase 1 and future phases of the development. One thing I wanted to mention just before passing it on to Bob is, I think the community is incredibly excited about this project. I can't go to the grocery store, or the drugstore, or the farmer's market, or anywhere else in town without somebody saying, or multiple people saying, when are you going to close? When is it going to get started? Phone calls, emails, responses to the Putnam Block website. And I think the enthusiasm is, warranted, significant, and incredibly welcomed. I think what people don't understand is the real depth of community support for this project when it comes to a financial component. So everybody is aware of the major investment, both in terms of dollars, time, and as anchor tenants that some of the most significant institutions in our community are making. Bennington College, Southern Vermont College, Southwestern Vermont Healthcare, the Bank of Bennington. I think what people are unaware of is the amount of community support that has also been a part of this project with regard to the equity, both leadership and preferred equity that has been raised or committed to date. And I was frankly shocked when I went through and did this calculation. But as of today, there are 64 institutions or individuals that are have put money into the Putnam redevelopment project. 64 individuals and institutions, and that's taking Bennington College as a single institution, Southwestern Vermont Healthcare as a single institution. Going back in, over a half dozen of those individuals have contributed multiple times or in multiple ways to the project. So if you count actual investments from the community, we're well north of 70 people or investments individually that are part of this project. This is not only the major institutions in our community getting in a boat and rowing in the same direction. It is significant community support. People are putting their hard-earned dollars into the future of Bennington because they understand the importance of this project.
Bill, is there a dollar value that you can put to that?
So that combined, leadership and preferred, is north of $3.6 million.
That's fantastic.
And we're continuing to raise a little bit more as we work our way to closings, but north of 3.6 now, 64 individuals and institutions.
That is amazing.
Great. So,
Bill, before you pass it off
to
sure. Bob, the remediation total expense is $750, or is that plus the asbestos?
All in, we're for this initial phase about $600,000, a little north of $600,000, including the environmental remediation, the asbestos remediation, the tank pull, the soil pull and stockpiling, and the demolition of the hardware store. All in, we're well over, as we get to future phases, because there's additional remediation that will be part of phase 2, will be close to $1.5 million.
It's amazing. It's just impressive on its face, you know, to actually conduct that pre-closing and for these investing parties to step up, participate without knowing there is actually going to be a closing, which is still, I mean, this just goes across the spectrum, that it's amazing.
Yeah. Fair amount of confidence there's going to be a closing.
Yeah.
So, great. So Bob will kind of walk you through the housing impact for the project, and then of course we'll be, either one of us will be happy to answer any questions. Bob, thank you.
Does this work if I stand up, or do I need to talk into the mic?
You need to talk into the mic, yeah. But we could lift the boom up.
Yep. Or share it with you. Mike, can you do anything on this?
I just like to stand up.
There you go.
Okay. Great. Or if it's too much trouble, I can sit. Great. Thanks. All right. Well, I'll stand close.
It's cut on this.
Yeah, I can point from here. So some of you have this handout, which is really just outlining some of the impacts. First, let me say, it has been an honor to work with the community over 2 years now, getting to where we are. And as Bill said, we're on the home run stretch for phase 1. We still have phase 2 to do. So we're not letting up the gas pedal. We are thinking and planning and talking about what that is. This map that you see up here shows phase 1, which is the one that's not shaded out, which includes the courthouse, Hotel Putnam, the Winslow building, and Old Castle and the attendant site behind that in its reconfigured form. Some of the buildings are gone in the middle. And then phase 2 are new buildings out along Main Street, and then phase 3 is actually another building on the back on Washington Avenue. And those buildings all together, I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of housing, and not only what in aggregate this is planned to do, but the impact of housing. Because one of the things that we've learned about getting a downtown to work economically is that, well, retail is hard. If you haven't noticed, there's not a lot of demand for retail. They're businesses that might like to be in that space, and it's difficult to sort of get enough foot traffic. What we're finding in small towns across rural America is that the way you do that is you put things upstairs. And that's businesses, which we have a number of businesses coming downtown, and it's housing. And we modeled some of that. That handout shows you on the front page, there's sort of a highlighted of the number of housing units that this project is proposing to bring in, which is across a wide spectrum. It's a total of 105 housing units all in. And the research that we did for your downtown now says that there's about 160 units in the downtown in its entirety. So we're not doubling what's down there, but we're making a pretty significant increase in the number of people who are going to live down there. That 105 new housing units are across a bunch of different income levels, but all total, they're estimated to contribute close to $4.2 million in economic activity in an annual basis. So that's the kind of impact that housing can have. And it's more than that. Again, some of the things that are highlighted on there talk about the engagement, the sort of ownership in downtown, the ability to sort of have people who can age in place. Again, a lot of the market is for seniors who are looking for a place that they can sort of walk to places they don't have to drive. And that activity also drives safety and security. So if you can have lights on upstairs, people walking on the streets, it starts to attract other people and hopefully attract other businesses, and then hopefully attracting other investment in other buildings. Because at the end of the day, this project we know is going to be a significant improvement to your town. We're hoping that it is really the incentive for other building owners to see that they can make an investment in their buildings and start to attract other people to live downtown or other businesses to move downtown because it's an active and a vibrant place. In the end of the day, that's really what this is hopefully going to do. So, of those 105 housing units, if you look on the back side, we are projecting a number of different income levels for that housing. So we call it housing for all incomes because we're really hitting a broad spectrum of housing for people at different income levels. In a really healthy place, our opinion is that you should have something like a normal distribution of housing. Some very low-income housing, a lot of workforce housing, housing in the middle, and then higher, some small amount of higher income housing. What we realize is a lot of people don't even know what that means. What does that mean? What are those income levels? So there's a chart on the bottom that sort of shows affordable housing, for instance, and the types of salaries, so retailers or caregivers, and a single person making $25,000 a year. So that's at 50% of median family income, which is a standard for affordable housing. Workforce housing at 80% of median family income, that single person would make $40,000, and then at 120, which is above that, is considered sort of higher end, is $60,000. They're not, some of our units are actually higher than that. It's not saying that they're all at 120, some are higher, and some would be lower than the 50, but those are kind of the break points, and it gives you an idea of the kinds of people that might be interested in that. The little graph below that shows you the distribution. So we're going to be adding in phase 1 about a third at higher end and then a third in the middle group. This is working on the assumption that of that 160 units that are currently downtown, that most of them are sort of naturally occurring affordable housing. We know that there's a few, but not a lot, of housing in that middle and upper income. So we're starting by adding some in the higher income, some in the middle income. We don't expect this to gentrify necessarily, and I don't think there's going to be a huge demand for people to start converting units into higher income, but we do expect over time that people will realize that, I can upgrade a unit or two and start to get a little higher end. And that's a good thing. That will actually attract some investment. It'll attract other people. It'll add value to your property, your grand list, and it'll start working towards that distribution. Phase 2 is that middle group of block. It's about 50-50 of higher and middle income. And then phase 3 is this block on Washington Street. As part of our funding and bringing additional sources of funding in for phase 1, we've been working with an affordable housing group that allowed us to leverage reserving that land for affordable housing allowed us to leverage the ability to get more new market tax credits to fund phase 1. And that is scheduled to have 20 to 30 units of affordable housing in phase 3 at some point in the future. So that's the total distribution and what makes up that 105 units of housing as we go down through the block. Any questions on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
the phasing in of housing, so if it's 105 with everything, sort of how do you see this being phased in terms of housing units coming in? You probably said that, but I missed it.
No, it's a good question. So phase 1 is the upper story of mostly the hotel in Winslow, and that if you look at that table on the back, the number of units are.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, there's 30 units in phase 1,
Okay.
and an additional 45 units in phase 2, and then 30 units more, I believe, in phase 3. Those may vary a little bit as we get down. Yeah.
So I think one interesting component, if you look at the call-out box on the housing sheet, we have all along, as we do economic development planning, I think any of you who have been part of the SEDS process have heard this interest in attracting more young people and families to our community. So young professionals in particular have been an interesting dynamic or component of the project for the development group. So we went out and did a survey of young professionals to kind of find out what they might be interested in for housing, kind of how their income ranges broke down and the like. And I think some of the highlights from that survey are called out in the box. Over 50% of the people who are currently renting, young professionals, indicated they'd like to live downtown if they could afford to do so at a similar price point to where they currently are renting. And over 25% of them indicated they would pay a slightly higher rent to live downtown and have access to services. I think the important and kind of really interesting point from our perspective is the fact that if you look at the breakdown that Bob just talked about, kind of the higher end housing, over 120% of the median family income in the community, 33% of the young professionals that responded fell into that category, kind of free market, people making over $60,000 as individuals, $77,000 as a family of 3. So in excess of that. 37% of the young professionals fell in that workforce housing category of 80 to 120% that Bob was talking about, and 30% fell in under 80% of median family income, kind of that more affordable category. So if you look at the breakdown on the back of the housing that Bob just described, the 105 units, it tracks almost exactly with that breakdown. We have 34% of the units, of the 105 units, will be over 120%, kind of that higher end. 37%, right on, the number of young professionals will be in the 80 to 120, and 29% will fall in that more affordable category. So we thought it was interesting. Wasn't planned that way, but it was really interesting that the demographics of young professionals, a cadre of people that we have been working really hard to keep in, retain and attract in Bennington, the breakdown of housing matches exactly what we're proposing for the project.
So right now, phase 1, the first 30 units, where are you in commitments or folks that are interested in taking those?
Of those 30 units, we have, the 1-bedrooms have a waiting list. The efficiency units, those unrelated to Bennington College, which will be, I think, 4 or 6, yeah, we have not yet started marketing, and we have 1 remaining 2-bedroom available. So 5 of the 30 units are not spoken for at this point, 4 of which we haven't even begun to market.
Has there been any marketing activity for phase 2 or 3?
Not yet.
But once we're through phase 1, it will demonstrate the going forward to phase 2. And did I hear really phase 3 somewhere relative to the build out on Washington? Is that a phase 2, or is that potentially?
We expect that will come after, certainly after phase 2 is planned, and probably not until after phase 2 is completed. We're expecting that component of the project will rely pretty heavily on some of the infrastructure that will be put in as part of phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. So the parking and other kind of improvements along the street that will be made as part of our phase 1 and 2.
Not to put you under any stress, because you've already been through that. When continue to until you close plus, what's the timeline for phase 1 closing, occupancy, and then going to phase 2?
Sure. So again, we're hoping to close December-ish, early December on phase 1. Construction would begin right away. 15 to 18 months is the expected construction time, so we would be Q1 or Q2, first half of 2020 for occupancy of phase 1. As Bob noted, we are into planning stages for phase 2, and the hope is that push that out exactly a year, and we're hoping to be into closing late next year for phase 2, whatever that looks like, 1 or 2 new buildings on the site, and then occupancy would be early in 2021. And then I think, phase 3, I think we could logically assume would be roughly a year after that.
Chad, you want to start it down this way?
Yeah. With after the closing, the current occupants or the businesses that are in there, are they being asked to move out, or what's the process with them that are the current shops and people?
Yeah. So you may have heard that as part of the funding for the project, because we're receiving federal funding in the nature of a community development block grant, there's a relocation process that has to be accommodated. So we have provided, as of October 1st, 90-day notices to the existing tenants in the Putnam block, the commercial tenants that are there. So that is the Verizon store, South Street Cafe, and Gary Jones. That's a 90-day notice requirement that they have to be vacated by January 1st. As part of that, we are also providing significant relocation assistance to those businesses. And at least with regard to South Street and Gary Jones, we know that they will be relocating back somewhere in the project. Not necessarily Gary will be coming back to the same site. South Street will be going to a different site within the project. We're also working now with South Street and with Gary to find out if there are ways to accommodate them even as construction begins. We're working closely with Breadloaf as the construction manager to see if we can come up with a construction schedule that would minimize the time that they would need to be out of that space into an alternative space. And we're frankly looking at other options for them as well. I think it's important to note that the project and the development team is required to and is really trying to go above and beyond with regard to assisting the businesses with relocation or other means while they have to be out of that space. Verizon has chosen to close and simply consolidate their operations down at the Price Chopper Plaza.
Thank you.
This is really a good breakdown, and I would encourage, I think we need to get this out as much as possible. I think it's a really very helpful way of looking at housing. And you used the word affordable housing several times, but at some level, this salary range from $25,200 to $32,400 is a pretty good salary.
Pretty good salary.
And so really it may not be affordable housing so much as housing that is affordable, which is, I think, probably how we should all be thinking about this. And this breaks that down nicely, so thank you for that. I have a number of friends that are in the steel construction business, and they're getting hit pretty hard because of trade wars and tariffs and our sort of national political mess that we're making. I wonder if the tariffs and the trade war stuff could be impacting this project in the near future.
It's certainly possible, and it may be possible on the next phase more than this. First phase, we're renovating existing buildings, so we don't have a lot of steel going into that, but who knows how that gets built into other components. Our construction manager, Breadloaf, has done a number of estimates on the designs, and based on their data in this marketplace, they haven't seen a change yet, but we'll be out on the street with final pricing and next week, actually. So we'll find out in a couple of weeks as to whether there is an effect or not on pricing. Yeah.
Is there, I assume, like everything else, there are contingencies built in and all that kind of stuff, so there's some cushion if...
We have some ability. We've done a lot of value engineering and a lot of sort of trimming and decisions. It's a complex project in all respects. The historic part of our funding is historic preservation money, which comes with a whole bunch of constraints, which I have to say, the courthouse, we went up, took the boards off the windows in that the other day and saw it for the first time with the light coming through those windows. It is a glorious space. It's sort of amazing to see that. So I'm glad that we have historic preservation coming into parts of this, but it adds to the cost a little bit. We're in the floodplain, which adds to the cost a little bit. There are old buildings that will be, when we're done, like new. We're bringing them up to today's energy standards and new finishes while trying to preserve all those pieces of the fabric. But we have a good team. You know, it's complex, but we have a team that we've worked with in the past, and we're confident we'll figure out a way to get a very good project out of it.
I see what you're saying. Maybe in phase 2, where you're building a lot of new from scratch, that's where these tariffs and the trade war stuff may really hurt.
Certainly the steel. We won't be using, there's a little bit of steel to support some point loads in phase 1, but it's mostly the structure is there, augmenting it a little bit, and then redoing everything else from the bones in, is new stuff.
So that's going to take place after midterm elections.
Yeah.
My speaker was off, I'm sorry. The Old Castle Theater is part of Phase 1, right?
Yes.
Are they going to be purchasing their property?
They are. So part of Phase 1 closing is a purchase and sale agreement with Old Castle. Yeah. So they will own it. We've been working with them about how to get easements in and out of their property, provisions for future expansion, some help with them to replace their roof. Their roof is at the end of its life, and they'd like to get some of that done. But they've been a great partner, actually, to work with throughout this process, and we're excited to have them continue. And,
Bob, have you worked with Breadloaf before in other projects?
I have. Okay. Several projects, and including the Brooks House. So Rudolph was our construction manager on the Brooks House, a very similar complex historic rehab building. Yeah.
Do they employ local contractors where they're able to? Is that part of the funding requirement?
I don't, it's funny, that just came up as a question to us from one of the funders as of today, whether there was a provision, and I'm not sure the answer to that because I don't remember having addressed that. But in general, they do. As a construction manager, as many of you know, they're from Middlebury, Vermont. We will get a superintendent, a project manager, a couple of assistant managers, and then almost everything else is shopped out it's bid to trades. So there could be carpenters that are bidding on pieces, sheetrock people, painters, all of that will be bid, including local folks. And in general, they hire local laborers. So I would not be surprised as we firm up the date, you'll start to see some ads in the paper where they'll try to find labor forces for demo and for some of the sort of work, even at sort of a lower skill level. They may bring some of their own carpentry crews, but in general, they outsource that as well and even bid against their own crews if they're going to do that.
We're going to need a couple food trucks during the construction because if South Street Cafe is not operating.
Yeah, I think South Street needs to do something.
Yeah.
There's at least 100 workers. I would not be surprised if there's not 100 to 120 workers a day on this project. It's a big project. Yeah. A lot of people.
We've talked about the downtown paving project and how it's been somewhat discomforting, but it's moved really well through the process. If we thought we had some challenges downtown moving things around, we should be welcoming this challenge because it's going to show that there's that activity. But it's not going to be a smooth, four-way stop at every corner. It's going to be construction trucks and activity, which I said we should all welcome that as a sign of where we're going.
That said, we expect the impact on flow of traffic downtown to be pretty minimal. I think we'll be able to stage most everything from the site and behind. Obviously, there will be times where things will need to be happening in the front, but I don't want folks thinking out there we're going through another phase of what recently has been experienced with regard to traffic downtown.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Jim.
Bill, I heard a rumor, and I'd like you to put it to rest. With the funding sources that you've gotten, are there any prohibited uses or construction restraints with respect to the buildings and how they'll be used?
So,
are there uses that are prohibited because of the funding sources? Is that your question? The answer to that is yes. Yeah. And there are, I don't have Craig here, now I have to remember this. Okay, can't sell liquor. You can have you can have a bar, you just can't sell liquor for consumption off-site. Can't have a massage parlor.
Can't have things that are restricted by the federal government. So, for example, we couldn't have a cannabis outlet of any type in there.
That's a new one. There were sort of 5, what Congress thought were sort of sins that they prohibited with the new market tax credits. In general, the 2 that you would do, you might do were the 2 I just mentioned. I can't even remember what the other 3 were.
That's interesting.
But a convenience store or grocery store could sell beer?
Yeah, in fact, we hope to have...
it's a liquor store, not beer and wine.
What role will TIF, the TIF district, play in this? And to the tune of how many coins?
Yeah, so with regard to phase 1, there's no expectation of a bonding for any public improvements as part of phase 1. In fact, as Dan well knows, and Zero Watt and Mike McDonough and I think the board, all the folks who were interested in putting together the TIF application for Bennington, that application relied fairly significantly on phase 1 of this project, creating that initial bump in the assessment downtown that allowed, frankly, the TIF to become possible. With regard to phase 2, I think we'll be looking at what the improvements that can happen primarily to the site would be that may make sense to be public improvements. And at that point, when those are identified, we would work with the town and come to the board and see what may make sense for infrastructure improvements that could happen as part of phase 2 that would be owned by the town long term, and that's how we'd come up with a number.
let's see. The rate for the efficiency apartments, that's not mentioned here. Is there a projected rate for them?
In general, they're in the $800 to $900 a month range for the smaller apartments.
But your one bedroom here?
In the initial phases.
Okay. But your one bedroom here on the graph says $675 a month, and
so that would be a calculation of affordability at 50% median family income in phase 3. And I think you have to look at too kind of the mix of what we know is happening at this point, which are the 80 to 120% units and the 120% and above units in phase 1. So, and that number is likely to change significantly between now and when phase 3 actually gets implemented, down the road. In fact, they actually came, the numbers were revised upward fairly significantly just this year with regard to median family income and what that concomitant rent would be in the community.
When you speak of affordable housing and the way that I've come, and many have come to understand it, are you going to be controlled or required to follow the federal guidelines, or is federal money not involved in these? Because as you may well remember, Shires Housing had a place on School Street, and the federal guidelines required the spending of $74,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment because of the federal requirements. Are you going to be constrained or required to do the same?
Yes. So I think, to a large part, that's those construction numbers are a result of the funding sources that might be utilized and what those expectations are. I don't think we know what the funding stack looks like yet for phase 3, and in fact, phase 3 isn't going to be done by the Bennington Redevelopment Group. It's going to be done by some other private developer, Shires, Housing Vermont, somebody else that does that business, knows that business all the time.
And then they would work on the funding sources?
Yeah, they'd be their own. That would be their own developer. I think what we perhaps didn't make clear, that phase 3, that housing component, the Bennington Redevelopment Group's role will be to transfer that component of the property to a private developer for that development. But what we now know is, you may recall previous site plans which showed kind of townhouses as a component, and hopefully I was clear, and however many public presentations I've done about this project at this point, that had never really materialized. Townhouses were an option, maybe another mixed-use building, maybe there'd be some other development on the site. What we now know is what that Washington and Franklin Lane component of the project looks like.
Okay, but to go back to, I'm confused about the construction, this quote-unquote affordable housing. Would Shires have to be a part of it first before construction begins, and then therefore they would have to get funding for it? Or would you construct it and then, which?
Bennington Redevelopment Group will not be a component of that housing, that last phase of housing we talked about. Bennington Redevelopment Group's only role will be to transfer the property that they will then own to a housing developer to do that component of the housing.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we've entered into an agreement to convey that land to Housing Vermont and probably Shires to team together to do affordable housing.
Good, they do great work.
So they would do that project, it would be their own project.
With respect to the soil that you have to reclaim or dig up, you said you're going to put it near one of the lumber, racks?
Yeah, the most southerly lumber shed in the corner of Franklin and Washington. It's out of the floodplain, it's covered, it will be secured by fencing, air quality will be monitored, all subject to the corrective action plan.
And what happens to it afterwards?
Just a placeholder, isn't it?
It gets buried in a foundation underneath the foundation, capped on the site in some future phase 2 excavation. So I think what's important to know, this is soil which is currently on the site. It's being excavated, moved to a location elsewhere on the site temporarily, and then buried deeper back on the site. Now, there is a component of phase 2 remediation, kind of here, right in this general area. Let's assume the old hardware store is here, which will be gone, kind of right outside the main entrance to the hardware store. The Greenbirds for years have had to monitor that site. There have been test wells there for I don't know how many years. We did extensive phase 2 investigative work there as part of the remediation process, and there's some soil there which is TCE contaminated. That soil, as part of phase 2, will be excavated by the Bennington Redevelopment Group and trucked off-site to a secure facility. So that contaminated soil, which is a higher level of contamination, frankly more dangerous than PAH soils, will be trucked off-site. So I think that's not part of phase 1, but that will be an important remediation component, and frankly the most expensive remediation component of phase 2.
So these PAHs are they toxic?
Well, I mean they're considered an environmental risk.
Okay.
So there is a level of toxicity, but we can virtually assure you that every property downtown has some level of these PAH soils. It was really interesting. There was an interesting kind of side stat going around when the EPA was recently looking at the levels of PAH soils, and they tested, downtown soils. They tested a number of things. The thing that came out the highest in PAH levels was a charcoal burger.
Was what?
Was a charbroiled burger.
Burger?
When you burn,
charcoal burger?
When you charbroil a burger, you're basically creating PAHs on the outside of your burger when you use charcoal. So,
or hot dog.
I must have had a hand in it.
So that's not to say you want to be digging around in PAH soil.
But you can't eat this soil.
Yeah, it's more to say you probably want to cut back on charbroiled burger.
But insofar, well,
Do more, broiling.
you got to pick your poison.
Yeah.
Anyway, these PAHs they'll go eventually into the water table and then naturally be filtered out.
I believe so. There are different strategies with different types of contaminants, and so the consultants in this case, a lot of this actually off gases and vaporizes into the atmosphere, and often if you have a location to bury it on site, that's what they do with the PAHs. So it's the hole that Bill was talking about with the other contaminants. When you remove that and we create a hole out there, they're going to backfill that hole with these soils and then cap them. So that was the strategy to manage it appropriately, to track it, and to make sure that we knew where it was going in the end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, the wooden structure on the back of the Putnam Hotel that was a later addition, is that going to remain, or is that going to be torn away?
No, that's coming down. What was the original Mount Anthony house, that had deteriorated in the upper floors beyond the salvageable condition. Mm-hmm. So as part of the renovation project, we're tearing that down, and as Bill just pointed, we're putting a small addition back onto it's a very unusual building. The brick hotel kind of wraps around that and is very thin on the front.
Yeah.
So when we tear down the wood frame building, there'll be a new building constructed in its place partway out, which the nice thing about that, it opens up that courtyard. If you've ever walked behind there, it's a very kind of constrained and not so nice place right now. So it actually will be a significant improvement as an outside space in the back as well, with some gardens and access points to go through there.
Okay, my final question, and it goes to Gary Jones, and my memory as a little boy getting a haircut by Bob Cummings' dad. There used to put a board across the arms of the barber chair so he could cut my hair. And it would be a shame to lose that history and nostalgia with the interior of that changing in any way. Is that not going to happen?
So, I mean, Gary is going to remain there after the construction. There will be, some improvements to that space, but, relatively minimal improvements to that space. Mm-hmm. We agree. I think, the redevelopment group recognizes kind of the historic nature of a barber shop there. I don't think anybody would plan to put, that use in a space if they were building it new today, but it's an important use in this particular space because of the history, because of Gary. And we intend to remove that. Now, Gary, we're looking for ways to kind of make him as comfortable as possible during the transition. I think if Gary had his way, he'd be cutting here and there with a Tyvek suit on as we were doing construction, a hard hat and a Tyvek suit, and he'd be happy to go. Unfortunately, we can't allow that, but we're doing what we can do to accommodate him and make that transition as easy.
How long would it be projected that he wouldn't have access? Any idea?
It's, if it was what the contractor would like to do is to take 18 months and get the building done and finish it and then move people back in. So we're trying to figure out what that balance is, whether there's some period of time they can stay, but we really need them to find, we need to help work with him to find a spot so he can continue to operate during construction. And then when it's ready for him to move back in.
One last question, then I'll shut up.
Let's ask
Come on, Jim.
All right. How about moving him to the Winslow building, or would that now?
All those buildings are going to be subject
Okay.
to.
All right, I'll shut up. That's it.
Please.
Great. Thanks for putting this all together. It's wonderful. Jim asked enough questions, so all mine were taken. It's okay, though. I just had, on the 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms on the original, on the first 30 units that are going in, just some, they're already pre-sold, so you must know price points. Where are you landing with the 1-bedroom and 2-bedrooms?
Generally, in the 1-bedrooms, we're at 11 to 1,300. The 2-bedrooms are 16, 1,700.
Great, okay. Thanks.
Well, I have the pleasure of going last, but I'm going to ask you all the questions and make all the comments I wanted to, even though I'm last. This is really quick, hopefully. We had an oil tank buried in our house, and we were able to access funds that the little bit of tax we all pay when we get our oil tank filled. Were you able to access those same funds? Or will you?
We have
Similar.
funds.
Great.
We have some grant funds that are coming in through State of Vermont Brownfield Program. We have some, thanks to our partners in the Wyndham region, we're getting some really flexible loan funds from the Wyndham Regional Commission to do a lot of this environmental work.
Great.
So-
I was hoping that you would have
really,
access.
That was one of the important components of DCIC's ownership was to be able to attract funding, which is only available to not-for-profits, right?
Great. Let's see. This is a really quick story, I promise. I worked for Williams College for about 10 years in the facilities department, and they often hired breadloaf. And there was a story that they were behind schedule on a dorm, and the kids were literally coming. The secretaries, the file clerks, all came down to Williams to paint, to get it open in time. So you don't have to worry about breadloaf. To me, these materials that you've presented us, this whole project to me has been so well-researched and well thought out, and I thought it was really amazing how your statistical analysis of the numbers of housing in each of the categories came out exactly as it did with your survey, matching up with that. It just proves to me how thorough and well-researched this has been. And my last comment will be, when I first heard about this project, and I knew it was, institutional investment, not a single developer, I knew it was going to work, because I'm really happy that the structure is what it is, because my heart breaks for Wilmington, and our hearts are not going to be broken because of the way this is structured. I hope you both can get some sleep and maybe go on a vacation soon. It's certainly well-deserved, so congratulations, thank you.
I just want to add one thing to the last point you made, Jamie. I think having the group around the table that we have has really, it's really been an incredible experience, because you might imagine there have been a number of times in this project where the days have been kind of dark. We weren't sure it was going to happen. And to a person around that table, every other Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., they said, we can't let this fail. We're going to figure out a way. And the brainstorming, the creative problem solving, working with, which was already a phenomenal team with Bob and Craig, who have gone through this in a similar project with the Brooks House and are now doing this all over the country. It's really been incredible, and I agree with you 100%. If this was somebody in it for a return on the dollar, this project would have died a long time ago. So, I think
Very good.
I think you're right on with regard to recognizing that component.
Just before I turn it over to Donald, but I think it's important, the vitality of this and everything, but we're looking for long-term return on investment. And I think when you suggested the $6.8 million addition to the grand list, that's what the community taxpayer is looking for, as an increase in our tax base. And that's really a critical component that can't go unsaid or unrecognized.
I think it's important, too, that 6.8 number is the projected increase in grand list for the housing only.
Yeah.
significant additional increase based on the commercial component of the project.
Good.
Bill, Bob, I think future Benningtonians are going to think of town in terms of before the Putnam redevelopment project and after the Putnam redevelopment project. I really do. I think it's going to be one of those things that is a break point in our own history. So I really hope that you are taking lots of photographs and aerial drones and before and after, because it's so easy to get these things done and then not have the before shots. But I do think this is a pivotal moment for Bennington, and it will be a moment in history for many, many generations.
I don't think we could have done it without the town's help, the state's help, and all the other investors and institutions.
Bob and Greg, is this a blueprint?
Well,
or
I have to say, so it is.
Yeah.
It's a conversation that we have, as Bill says, all over the country about really community-led development in towns that there's no other way to do it. As we like to say, it's, nobody from outside of town is coming to do this because it doesn't make any sense. You're doing it for other reasons. So it is a blueprint in a lot of ways. It doesn't make it easy. I have to say that, we've now, when we did the Brooks House, we were told that was the most complicated financial structure in the country at the time. This one is more complicated. No question about that.
That's great.
On behalf of the Select Board and the town of Bennington, we wish you great tidings of success going forward. Looking forward to the closing, and we'll be there to root you on. And I think forget scaffolding, just get that wrecking ball.
Wrecking ball.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's great.
Looks like a question. Audience.
Question?
No, there's no questions tonight. This is a presentation. Thank you. Permission to sell property taken at tax sale in 2017.
Have you jumped over the RFP review?
Yes. Oh, you want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Hold it.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Number 6, report on RFP.
Okay, I guess I must have used my old, this is a late addition to my agenda.
Sure.
It was, I had a couple, yes.
Yes,
Okay,
unfortunately.
Zerot, would you like to report on the RFPs for the former highway garages, and which you circulated, shared with us?
Yes, this is an update on the request for proposals for the town garages, which the Select Board asked the town staff to conduct in June. We announced the RFP in June, and the proposals were due on August 6th. We received, so this was for the town garages, the request for proposals was for the 2 town garage properties at Depot Street and Orchard Road. Just to refresh everybody's memories, Orchard Road across the street from Molly Stark Elementary School, Depot Street in downtown Bennington. We received 2 proposals for Orchard Road and 2 for Depot Street. I provided a memo to the Select Board detailing what the nature of some of those proposals, of each of those proposals was, and I'll just quickly highlight some of those, what the proposals were, and I'll be happy to answer additional questions. So for Orchard Road, we received 2 proposals, one from SVT Masonry, LLC. The proposal was for purchasing the property for $40,000 to use as storage space typically associated with the masonry business, and to explore education and training in the profession of masonry for high school age students. The second proposal was from the Bennington School District, and they offered a 2-year lease with annual payments of $4,000 and with the right of first refusal to negotiate purchase of property at end of lease period. Their ambition is to store annual salt allotments for the Bennington School District and for the high school and middle school, as well as maintenance equipment and materials. Land would also be used on an as-needed basis for additional parking for Molly Stark Elementary School, where, as you may know, there are some parking issues, especially during pickup and drop-off. For Depot Street, we received 2 proposals as well. The first, which we haven't really advanced to this final stage, was from Green Mountain Lines to store 2 commercial tour buses, and I've provided some explanation as to why the staff was declined, moving this proposal forward. The second proposal was from Madison's Brewing Company, and this is a proposal to purchase the property, I understand, for the assessed value of $80,000, or to lease it. I think that is something that would be subject to negotiation, or to have the property donated to them. The purpose is to acquire the building for a downtown brewing, kegging, and canning facility and tap room. So those are the 4 in our hands.
These came with observations and recommendations. I think it is appropriate for the board to hear those. Could we hear about the masonry recommendation or observation?
Yeah, so the first, the topic that kept coming up was that with the proposed use for some kind of a construction business, a change of zoning would be required. So if this proposal were accepted, it would still need to get DRB approval, and Dan can say a bit more about that. And we did mention that, we were somewhat concerned about the proposed activity and how complementary it would be to the character of the neighborhood, especially with the school being located across. I know that Reuben Harrington of SBT Masonry submitted an additional letter trying to alleviate some of those concerns, but it's up to the select board to work through what his proposal is. And secondly, so that's SBT Masonry. Any additional questions about that, or should I move on to?
I think we're probably just going to hear the baseline.
Right. So with Bennington School District, one recommendation from the town staff is that if the basis of the 2-year lease was the school district's concern about potential soil contamination, we would recommend that during the period of that lease, the school district be encouraged to undertake whatever phase 1 investigation would be required, so that it would be worth our time as well to undertake that lease agreement. Let's see, so with Green Mountain, as I mentioned, we declined moving this proposal forward, but we have been working with the proprietor of Green Mountain Lines to see if there are ways in which we can assist him. And I put him in touch with Jonathan Cooper from BCIC so that they could explore potential other properties that would be suitable to his needs. Great. With Madison Brewing, we had a few recommendations. We weren't sure what what Madison Brewing's understanding of the potential need for a phase 1 for the site was. So they did provide a timeline that I also included with the memo material, and we just wanted to take into account, I know one directive that we got from the select board when we undertook this RFP was that whatever proposal would come in would result in a fairly expedient transformation of this property and opening for new use. So we just wanted to be clear in conversation about the projected timeline versus what the actual needs of the property might be to undertake that transformation. We also recommended that given that there was a proposal for acquisition, lease, or donation, our recommendation is to the select board is to consider the proposal to purchase. And finally, I think our main concern was that given that Madison's does currently have a project underway on Main Street that in the information that was submitted to us is projected now to open in January 2019. We would recommend actually waiting until that project is completed, and indeed in that spirit conduct perhaps a new RFP, because we have received some other interests after the closing. So this often happens. I mean, we had hoped that everyone would know about this between June and August, but of course, as often happens, right after August, suddenly people were knocking on my door. And I think given that, this is not a project that Madison seems to be ready to do immediately, they have another project in hand. I think we have representatives from the Madisons here who can probably answer that better. We would prefer reconducting this, conducting this RFP anew so that Madisons can resubmit with all these considerations, and we have we have the opportunity to vet some other proposals as well.
Great. That's a real good capsulization of the project's potential. I would ask if there are any individuals or representatives of companies here that would like to speak to the RFPs. Maybe you could step forward and be introduced.
Happily move forward.
Good evening.
Good evening, how are you guys?
Good, good.
I'm Robert Harrington, I'm the owner of SVT Masonry.
Right, thanks.
I just wanted to stop by and just talk to you guys about, there was concern because I think when they start talking construction, I think people have the image of cranes and bulldozers and dump trucks and, you know what I mean, crazy stuff going on. And basically, we're just going to be storing scaffolding, plank, boards, things like that, leftover material. We do have lulls, but 99.9% of the time we're on jobs. There's not a lot of storage. Things are always out on work, out on jobs. Typically they all come back at one time on a big truck, they get unloaded. We gear up for the next job, they get sent out. I spoke with Zerwa on this, that basically we would work with the school. I have no problem working with the school with the parking, with the salt shed, any of that. I'm not looking for any extra out of the school. I'm more than happy to work with them if they're willing to work with me. Also, like the building itself, I would really like to do a lot of improvements to, you know, dress it up. I mean, it looks like they were just dragged from a riverbed and put there, you know, so I'd really like to do something that would dress it up, make it look a little, you know, I'm a mason, so stone, brick, cladding, things of that type is what I'm thinking of. Maybe even something that could match the school so it kind of look, you know, it'd complement it, you know what I'm saying? And I basically just want to put some people's minds at ease because, you know, when you hear construction, you just think of
Yes, we did. Yeah.
guys swearing, you know what I mean? Just inappropriate things around children, and that's really not what it's going to be about. And the other part I touched base with too is trying to get more kids involved with the trades. We're short. We're 3 million short in the country right now for skilled tradesmen. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we reach out to the surrounding school areas, and I would be willing to set up some kind of curriculum and teach kids. I mean, on my own time to try to get these younger generations involved, you know. We're a growing company. I mean, we're 35 employees right now.
That's great. Where are you operating out of now, Ruben?
What's that?
Where are you operating out of now?
I'm operating out of a 2-bay garage right now, and it's just squished.
Yeah.
I'm just squished. It's horrible, you know. So, you know, we're constantly looking. We're constantly trying to find a home. Mm-hmm. And I saw this come up, and I was like, what a good place to make a home, you know, to be right there. And, you know, we'll do our best to work, like I said, with the school. I know there's a lot of concerns with that.
Are you aware of the zoning limitations?
I am aware of that, yes, sir.
Do you want to do some questions or not?
I'd like to get some input from both.
Yeah,
please.
Our peak season is, I'm going to say probably, obviously it's masonry, so it's late spring, right through the summer, but fall and winter, things die right down. And like I said, the salt shed, they can store salt in there. You know, I'd even help them load it up if they didn't have a machine to do it, so it's not a big deal.
Ruben, it's great that you came down, and it's thank you for doing it. You know, it's nice to put a face to a proposal.
Yeah.
It's very different having someone from the community walk in here and just speak their mind. So thank you for making that a priority.
I appreciate you guys listening.
I wonder if the school board didn't want to buy the property and you were working out some sort of shared arrangement with them where some of their needs could be met in an arrangement with you. How much of that space do you figure is essential for your business? What percentage of the lot would be necessary for what you need to get done? Is it a quarter, a half, 3/4?
I think 50% would be a fair assessment.
So there might be a way of working out, you guys using 50% and then you doing a free lease or a subsidized lease to the school for the...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I want the record to indicate that Chad is for
Yeah, I think everybody would like to see it go back on the tax roll. You know what I mean?
That's why we're doing this.
Loud and clear, that's why I mentioned it.
Okay.
Gene.
I think we should start a CDC curriculum for masonry.
I've tried with the school. You know, unfortunately, I'm good friends with Kevin Potter. He's a local 2 rep for the union in Albany, and I asked him to come here tonight. He was busy, but he also wants to be involved with that. And we've tried on separate occasions to try to start something at the CDC. It's hard, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it really is.
yeah.
It's hard to get something going and the ball rolling on that, but we've been trying to start something. So
I know another mason, and he said he has to turn down about 2/3 of the calls that he gets.
It's off.
for
Yeah, no,
work.
we do
He just
too.
can't do it all.
Yeah, we're literally turning down work. Yeah, I get probably realistically 20 bids a month on commercial projects, and you can't. If I had 100 guys, I could keep 100 guys
Right.
busy, put it that way.
Thank you for
Keep a
coming.
lot of guys busy.
Thank you. Ruben, I think we have the questions and answers from you, and we'll follow up from there.
All right, thank you,
Great,
guys. I
thank you.
appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the Bennington School District or not? Bennington School District, we have heard from. Green Mountain Lines, Madison Brewing Company. Madison? Good. Didn't see you hiding back there.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Mel and Mike. Good to see you. You probably have to introduce yourself for the record.
Mel Madison, Madison Brewing Company.
Mike Madison, Madison Brewing Company.
All right.
Madison Brothers.
Yeah, never guess. Could you just give us maybe another overview or perspective of your interest in the property on the old town garage on Depot?
Yeah, so overall, we just incorporated another phase of the company. We started a distribution company, and so we're in the process of getting our distribution license for Vermont and New York State. Massachusetts will follow thereafter. Our goal is to expand our brewing operations. Right now, we have a 7-barrel brewery, and if you don't know how big that is, we brew roughly about 210 gallons at a time, mainly in-house. We have a small canning facility that we're leasing a small spot right now. And with the current project across the street that we're going to have some of our beers over there, but not all of them. So that being said, our biggest concern is maximizing our current capacity. Because once we get distribution going in New York, and I mean, we already have dozens of locations just waiting for us to get rolling here. And we go to many shows and whatnot, and especially like in New York. And we're virtually the only Vermont brewery that's there, and we are absolutely killing it with our brewers. We have such tremendous brewers, Will Gardner and Ross Richards, and they're just chomping at the bit to help us expand our operations. And with that being said, we want to expand our brewing operations outside the restaurant, and we want to add a major canning facility and tap room, retail area. And Vermont is it's the largest income goer for tourism in the state of Vermont right now. And everything is a lot of areas are north of Rutland. We don't get a lot around here. And that being said, we're only literally an hour away from the capital district there. We are virtually 1 million people an hour away, 10 million 2 hours away. And to make a prime example, let's say Hill Farmstead up in Greensboro, Vermont, and Northeast Kingdom in the middle of nowhere. People are traveling in groves. It's like a big pilgrimage to go up there. And, the breweries are outstanding. But, we could do the same thing down here to draw that amount of people to this area. And that's our goal. And we thought that, the garage, old garages are ideal for breweries. For example, I was down at Park Slope, Brooklyn area a few weeks ago, and I went to Other Half Brewing Company. It's just on a side street and right near the Brooklyn Bridge area. And it's this old garage that just converted into a brewery. They don't even sell food, and there was a line a mile long going in there. And they're one of the top breweries. They're the biggest hit in New York right now. And that's where we want to go with Madison's. We've been around for almost 23 years. We are looking to to grow and expand our brand.
The part of this proposal process, there was sort of not a real proposal on how you would acquire it, purchasing it, leasing it, or quote, donating. You discount the third one. The first two, what's your preference?
Well, I mean, it's negotiable. I mean, we don't know the value of the place, especially with the condition of it. So we'd have to see what the appraised value of the building and go from there.
And you don't want to do site one, phase one analysis, et cetera? Phase one environmental consideration?
Yeah, definitely an environmental because of the trucking and, a lot that was going on there. There definitely would have to be an environmental inspection before we would consider anything, obviously.
You also are opening your facility across the street, 421, in January?
That is correct.
Right? And I think there was some restiveness relative to opening and granting your interest or following your interest based upon your other project. Isn't that taking your focus and time and effort?
Well, with our brewers that aren't a part of that project across the street, they would definitely spearhead that third project. And, myself and Mike are definitely working on this new one. We're promoting some of our people at Madison's, our management team, to bring them over across the street to get that rolling for us. And while at the same time, because we're already planning phase of the new corporation of the distribution part, because we're going to be doing that out of the restaurant and hitting other accounts. We're just concerned that we're going to be maximizing our brewing capacity rather quickly, and we want to get things rolling within the next 2 years or so.
Mel, what would be your timeline for if you acquired the facility, doing your...
Well, if we purchased it, and I know we got one quote on the roof that was pretty high, but realistically, we're looking at minimum 1.5 to 2 years for the entire project to be done. But we can easily get into the building and start the canning line and get the ball rolling. So business would start within 3 to 5 months after the purchase, possibly, to get the canning facility up and going and to go from there. But as far as, we want to go to New York and through, Massachusetts or around New England area, we definitely need to have the much larger brewery, ready to go. So we're expecting that would be at least 1.5 years away.
Okay. Questions, Jeannie?
So my understanding, you would have the tasting room piece of this, sort of the public piece of this open and...
Correct, and there's also would be a community space as well, as far as people want to rent space there or have events there. It'd be a nice open aired area. They have the large garage doors. I don't know if you've been in these new age style breweries. When you walk in, the breweries are right there. There's large space. And, there's a lot of areas where you can do community events. And also there's a tasting area. It just draws just a tremendous amount of people to these places.
So what percentage of the building do you actually need for the brewing aspect?
Probably less than half of it for actually just the brewing system.
Yeah, just for the system, then you need your walk-in, you need a much larger walk-in cooler, and then, area where your deliveries would come in. You'll be getting grain and hops and malt. No, it's 5,400 square foot, the entire property. So as far as the brewing area, you're probably looking at no more than 2,000 to 2,500 square feet maximum.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom?
It's a very interesting horse and a cart situation where it's difficult for you to put in a firm proposal until you know what's there, right, in terms of hazardous material or asbestos or oil or something. And I can see how we may get into this problem with other...
It's going to come up at every single...
It's going to come up on every single one. So it does feel like something that it may actually be in our best interest to sort of run it to ground a little bit. Or we're going to have to structure it so that with each proposal we consider, there's sort of a long due diligence period, and then we consider that proposal again at the end of it. But
Carson, you're more familiar with these commercial purchases, but most of the time, aren't they contingent upon phase ones or other environmental considerations as part of the purchase?
Yeah. And Stuart, are there funds currently available, either and I don't want to speak specifically on it, but are there funds available through the town or another funding source that could help look into this?
Not through the town, not through the town.
What
but
about through?
Potentially, there are brownfields.
That's what I was going for.
Monies.
I don't know if there's any money left.
Yeah,
Has any money been spent on that this year?
On this particular property?
Well, I know not on this particular property, but are there funds available annually on that? Do we?
So I can answer this a little bit, maybe.
I'd love that. Thank you.
So BCRC does, or did, have funds for Phase 1 investigations. In the proposal, in the RFP, we did include in the submittal proposals a line saying, should the successful bidder wish to obtain a Phase 1 environmental assessment, funds for said assessment may be available through the Bennington County Regional Commission. So, if there were parties who were interested in exploring that, I, was definitely putting them in touch with Jim Henderson, and I've been doing that throughout the year. I don't know, Dan and I don't know off the top of our heads what that pot looks like and whether there's anything available, but that's been, the entity to which we've been directing that line of inquiry.
Because that's going to come up at every step of the road. I mean, these guys have it's the exact, I'll speak for myself, it's exactly what we want to do with this space. You're speaking to the idea of other garages like this have been turned into breweries. It speaks to what we just had in front of us with the downtown redevelopment project. It's like a bow on it is being presented. I just wish we could figure out a little bit on the environmental side. These guys aren't going to take on that huge risk. We just need them to kind of talk back and forth. I didn't mean to interrupt. This is why we did this RFP process. We were hoping something floated to the surface.
Well, and the
RFP
was really... the ask is still there, right? Anyone that's interested could connect with BCRC and get that ball rolling. So it's sitting there for somebody to take.
I guess what I was getting at is it seems somewhat inefficient and slows the process down a lot for every applicant to have to go through that process on their own.
It becomes public information. If they do it.
So if one person does it, it becomes, okay, so, well, maybe that's what we need to just do. One of the reasons, this RFP, we didn't know what we were looking for. I think this board wanted to see maximum public benefit come from this, in the broadest sense. And one of the possible outcomes could have it not involved the town transferring it. So if it was a nonprofit use, for example, that the town really wanted to see happen, we might not have to transfer it, and some of those things might not have to be done. But if it's going to be sold, it seems inevitable that we're going to have to address this stuff.
My sole purpose wasn't to just keep it town-owned.
Yeah.
My sole purpose was to look at all options, and one of those could have been a private sale, Ruben's example.
That's what I'm saying. We left the door open to many different things, so that if we go down the route of looking to a private sale, we're going to have to figure out this hazardous material thing.
I'm not sure that we have to. I think the purchaser has to.
The group of, not the select board, but the
applicant, the party that's buying, has to decide after they conduct a Phase 1 whether or not they want to go any further. I don't think the town has it in its budget or financial ability to actually do it.
There could be means to a Phase 1, though,
Yeah, but not
that
by-
aren't going to be an economic impact to these guys either.
Yeah, well, they'd have to look at that.
Sure.
Okay.
We shouldn't be
We'd have to double
negotiating.
check with Jim Henderson, because I can't remember, between when we discussed, I think that pot may have been diminishing over the recent months. So again, we were hoping that this interest and inquiry would happen between that June and August period.
Yeah. Good.
Could I just, the Phase 1 is I
Just
think
explore.
It's just what people do when they buy a piece of property. It's not some unusual.
Especially being the building that we're talking about.
It's not some unusual requirement. Any financer can require that regardless of whether the building is considered clean or not. So I don't think this is an additional burden for this property. It's pretty typical. I also would like to say that if they're not going to use financing, they don't need to do Phase 1. That's for their own purposes. If they want one, that's fine. But if they're not going to use a bank or another financing company, it's not like they're required
Right.
to Phase 1. They can make themselves feel comfortable. Another point, and Jim Henderson's been dealing with this, is each financing company, each bank, each investor, et cetera, they're going to have their own
Checklist.
format they want for their Phase 1, and they're pretty specific about it. So sometimes you can risk wasting money if you don't have a financing company that says, yes, this is what we want to see in that Phase 1. So
if you do a generic one, it might not be useful to everybody else.
Just something to consider.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, other questions? Jean?
No.
I have one more.
Oh, check one.
On the $80,000 number, I read your report, what you put out, Zerwa. Are you guys landing somewhere around that number as far as an offer, or are you guys still want to find out, kind of maybe do a phase one, or what kind of offer are you putting on the table?
Yeah, we just put that out there as an example, but we would definitely want to do a phase one, and then afterward sit at the negotiating table and decide afterward what's an agreed amount.
I just wanted to have the proposal. I mean, in that proposal, it's $707,000 without buying the building. The brewing system alone is probably $250,000 to $300,000 just purchasing it without installation.
The sales the easy part.
Yeah, and that's 6 months just to make that system. So, once we order it, it's probably 6 months before it'd be delivered.
And just a reminder, I mean, these guys right here are two local business owners that have, we drive by your restaurant, it's constantly busy, and you guys are willing to invest in another project in the immediate downtown. We need more of these guys. I mean, it's exactly what we want.
Yeah. Okay, we can talk about that.
I do have a question, but it's actually more for Zerwa. So if we were to reissue the RFP, what's your timeline for the second go-around?
Again, we can only make a recommendation. I would say maybe even we could, I would recommend maybe going into it at the end of December, January maybe, just so that I think, given that some of the interested parties, it seems, could all benefit from a bit more time, I just would like to have a second RFP with a higher likelihood of getting better, a wider range of proposals as well.
I wonder if this summer has something to do with the loans.
Right.
So that would be my recommendation right now, but I'm happy to talk with the
It does
select
seem a
board
little
about it.
bit unsettling, though, that these guys did get something in. I think it should be reminded that we have a proposal on the floor, when the RFP process happened, in some form, they did get a proposal in.
Absolutely.
So before opening it back up, we should probably give some priority to people who are here.
Yeah, I think we have to have that discussion in executive
Right.
session.
Yeah. It's fine, I just...
Yeah. No, and absolutely, that's why we are bringing the recommendations of what we've received, and I think, if anything, our recommendation to reissue the RFP would be also a gesture of fairness, so that, yes, we received a proposal, but I think we can vet a more comprehensive proposal.
Okay, are there any other questions?
No questions.
Thanks for coming down. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. Thank you, Zero. Stay tuned.
Sorry?
We're not going to have any further.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that will actually go to number 7. Oh, yes. Why don't we, just before we end up, okay. Yeah, thanks, Alfred. Rotary would be upset. Okay, number 7 on.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm here tonight. Last year, 2017, during the tax sale process, the town of Bennington acquired the rights to 209 Pleasant Valley Road. It contains a home and several cabins. Might have been the Pleasant Valley Motel at one time. The tax liability at that time was $59,920. The redemption period has run, which is a 12-month redemption period without the property being redeemed. And added to that are the 217 taxes and 1% per month interest and penalties from the 2017 taxes not being paid. And of course, on November 10th, the 2018 taxes will most likely be delinquent, bringing that total to around $79,413. I'm seeking permission from this board to put this property up for public sale at that price, $79,413.30.
Do I have a motion to that effect? Motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay. For discussion relative to public sale, does that could mean you're going to do an auction or?
We could either approach it as an auction on site or sealed bids. And we've been doing it via the sealed bid process for the other properties we've acquired in years past.
Is it currently occupied?
Pardon me? It is not occupied at the present time.
That's my question.
Yeah.
And what kind of condition is the place in, would you say?
The cabins most likely would be removed. The building, I think the bones of the building are good, but it's in rough shape.
What's the acreage?
I don't have that right off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
It's small though, isn't it? It's tucked into a fairly small lot.
I don't know. I don't dare guess.
It's more than an acre.
Oh, is it?
You've got there's many outbuildings, there's the cabins, there's a mobile home, and there's the house. The only thing possibly salvageable probably is the house. Even Larry has questions about the house being salvageable.
So Larry and John Antioni have looked at this a little bit. Do they have a sense of value, or just Larry?
Larry went out there to secure the property and was able to get inside and check it out. It's in rough shape.
How's it assessed right now? Did you say that already?
It is. I'm not going to be able to tell you that.
Okay.
Its current tax liability is about $6,000 a year.
So that's probably...
Was this in bankruptcy for a bit?
No, not that I'm aware of. The property was acquired by the former owner. Also, the property that was My Land Nurseries was also part of that. That went to sale in 2016. It was acquired by an individual across the street, across the highway. This property we took at sale.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
This doesn't just relate to this property. Only one property this year gone?
Only one.
I guess I would kind of be drawn to that conclusion, but
yeah,
it seems like there's been more in years past. So
well, we just went through a process where we've been trying to dispose of 4 properties that we acquired at sale in 2016, and unfortunately, that has been a very long and trying process. The properties were never vacated. The redemption periods ran. We had to go through formal eviction processes on 2 out of the 4, and one we just rebid because the deal fell through. So I've told Dan if I ever want to bid on property at tax sale to slap me upside the head. It's a pain in the neck.
okay.
I suppose assessed value and none of that stuff really matters. What really matters is who's willing to walk in and put a bid on a super distressed property like that.
What we always attempt to do with these is simply recover the taxes and legal fees that we've expended in going to sale.
Or better, yeah.
Well, what happens if somebody bids greater than the liability, the former owner gets the excess funds.
I see.
We don't.
But don't you, as a general rule, pretty much sort of have to take the property as much as you don't want to, because you've got that possibility of a sale to maybe get some portion of that back? If you just you abandon the property.
We look at properties. This property was not abandoned at the time it went to sale, but we look at properties where the tax liability does not appear to be forthcoming. We've tried numerous agreements. We've tried a whole host of ways to bring the property current with the taxes and have failed in every case. And that's the only time we think of moving on a property. Our goal is not to own property and to dispose of it this way. Our goal is to make sure that people can pay their taxes and get current. And we try and try and try.
What's the timeline for if the board decides to?
With this approval, we would immediately either take it to an auctioneer or do a sealed bid notice and have it out there, hopefully to close before the snows fly. So I'm thinking late November or next weekend.
Yeah, right. No, okay, I think we've had enough discussion on this.
Sorry.
All in favor of giving the manager the go-ahead to sell this property at either public auction or private or published sale? Signify by aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Got it. Your next one.
Errors and omissions. You were provided this by the Board of Listers. This requires your approval because the grand list for this tax year has already been closed. So the select board would need to approve this change in the parcel, and it's a relatively straightforward. Two parcels actually merged, and it requires a deletion of a tax bill on one of the parcels with a revised tax bill for the second parcel. It was an error on the part of the lister's office that those parcels weren't merged in the past.
So you need a motion to accept the proposal. Dealing with this.
Second.
Any other comments or questions relative to the process?
So Skippery Road is part of it in Pownell, part of it in Bennington? Must be the case.
Yes, that is the case.
Okay.
All in favor of the errors and omissions being granted? Signify aye. 7 in favor. Stu, carry on.
Thank you very much.
Your report.
I don't have any action items tonight. Did have an email exchange with Jeannie about the agencies as we're coming into the budget season. Last year, we asked the agencies to submit a number of documents, plus a letter explaining what they do, and they were also offered the opportunity to address the town meeting in March. And in exchange, and essentially in exchange for that, they would not be required to petition, because last year, you recall, it was the third year, so a petition would have been required. The board waived that and asked, actually changed the way the agencies were treated. And these are the agencies that ask for less than $7,500. Those that want more than that have to petition, or at least must continue to petition. But they can all join together in one petition with the amounts delineated, so it's not burdensome on those agencies. But, so I'm here tonight to, if that's what you'd like to do. I think we tried it on a one-year basis. I'm assuming it was successful. We had agencies address.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm remembering that Sunrise did not need to petition, and I thought, and they're definitely over 7,500.
They did petition.
I didn't think that. I thought that what we decided was that we were not going to make agencies that had the same, that were requesting the same funding as in previous years do the petition, but instead what we were wanting to do is actually get real information out of them so that people weren't voting blind. And that information was going to be available to the public in a timely fashion so they could actually know about it.
And then come to the annual
And then come to the annual meeting, and I don't know that it was a request because we only asked a couple weeks ahead of time, but we have the opportunity to say, here are the steps. We want a letter explaining what you've done in the community. We want real financials, and we want you to come and do the quick 3-minute or 2-minute, whatever it is, spiel about what you've been doing at the floor, at the town meeting. So, I think part of what was concerning, and I know it was more than, Tutorial Center was in the same boat, and they both asked for more than 7,500. So I think the discussion that we had was, why are we making nonprofits who already are understaffed and working as hard as they can to support this community, take the time to do a petition when we know that historically the petitions get voted yes, but people are voting blind because the only thing they know is just what they hear around town. They don't have any real data from the nonprofits. So we were trying to both lessen the burden on nonprofits and get more accurate information. And if we want to do that, I do think it's really imperative that we give nonprofits enough time to actually get us the information. If they don't get us the information, they don't end up on the ballot. And last year, because of the timing, we had some nonprofits who didn't submit, but still ended up on the ballot. So, I mean, I think there is a trade-off there. We're asking for something in return to lessening the petitioning burden.
Again, I guess, if it's, I think the old way was if it's more than $7,500, you go to the petition route. I think there was discussion to say, if you're asking for the same amount, then as long as you do A, B, and C, you're on the ballot.
Right.
But as long as A, meaning get the financials to us in time for when we're preparing the budget, to either keep you on the ballot or let you know that you're not going on, I guess at that particular point in time, they're still free to try to get a petition up. But I think a lot of this has to do with timing. But I don't see the need to ask a not-for-profit that's been on the ballot on a year-in, year-out basis to do that same exercise when they're going to be having to give us this information. And if they don't, that's going to be a precondition for not putting them on. I mean, is that?
Yeah, that's my recollection, and I actually went through the packets from this time period and tried to piece together the story, and it wasn't altogether clear, but that's definitely the crux of what the discussion was what you just said. It was, we'd rather have them do something more meaningful than be running around getting signatures. What would be, just for clarification, if there was a new not-for-profit that was requesting to be on the ballot, what was that process going to be?
So then they had to petition.
That would be an automatic petition one time?
Or if you change your amount.
Or if you change your amount.
I understand the changing your amount, so if a new not-for-profit wants to be on the ballot, would they petition 1 year, the first year, no matter what the amount?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just looking for
The other part,
clarification.
Stuart, I'm not sure if the policy was, or the discussion was, how long this would last. Is that in perpetuity? If you'd asked the same amount year in, year out, you don't have to go to the petition, or was that going to be sunsetted after a certain number of years? But
do we need to decide this tonight? I feel the need to go back and look at those minutes again, like you did, Jean. Is there a timing reason to?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, one of the reasons
There
is that
is.
we want to make sure we get these not-for-profits their status, so they know if they have to go to a check round, I guess get together and come up with their petition. But I think even more importantly is to make sure that their financials in order, because some of these had to really struggle to get that. And so I do think we've got a relative short timeline on it.
Because the timeline is short for everyone. I mean, if we're asking for the agencies that are normally included in the budget to have everything to us by November 15th, that's actually a pretty short turnaround time particularly for the larger organizations.
It can't wait another meeting, yeah.
No, it really can't. And I mean, we did vote, I mean, I think my memory was that, Donald, I mean, your concern was doing this, like sort of passing something that we do forever, and I agree with you. I think last year we did it rushed at the end, so we didn't get the result, the total result that we wanted. I'd really like to do this a couple times, at least twice through, giving people enough time to actually submit information, see what we get, and see where it takes us. Because right now, all we're doing is asking people to go out, get petitions. We don't get any information from them, and then they're on the ballot.
No, you and I agree for sure. I think we all agree on the need for information, or the desire for information, and the desire to have the public be more informed about these agencies. Absolutely agree on that. I think the part that I struggled with last year and continue to struggle with is once you're on the ballot, you're always on the ballot. And I think we wrestled that to the ground last year, or maybe we left it that it was a pilot year and we were going to try it that way 1 year. I just can't remember.
We left it that we were going to revisit it, and I guess that's what we're doing right now. My concern is that we didn't do a very apt job last year.
Yeah, I don't really feel like we can count last year, quite frankly. I think we need to tidy up the process and make this year one.
And I think the letter that went out was also not as clear as it could be in terms of what the agency's responsibilities were. So I think if we have something that's clear, and I think we had really nice examples from like Town of Manchester, what they require, agencies to nonprofits to provide us with. If we can get something out fairly soon, I think that would be helpful. And
How
then see
many,
what
how
we
many
get.
not-for-profits are we talking about?
There were a bunch. There were like 15.
I think there were 13 on the ballot last year, and that was because the rescue squad was moved into the budget.
Okay.
Yeah. What's your feeling, Stu, about the process and making it
Well,
easier for
I guess
staff?
I would rather know sooner rather than later
Yeah.
that what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of time when you get 13 agencies submitting a letter, and then it depends on what you mean by financials. I think Manchester, if I remember correctly, looked for a lot of information from a financial perspective. Then we've got to put that into packets. We've got to get it out to you guys. And it becomes time consuming for us in the office to get it there. Unless the agencies really do their due diligence and get us a complete packet. And many times they don't.
Here's an idea, and this may make the process even worse, so just tell me if it does. Would it be more efficient if you set up 45 minutes one day and all the not-for-profits came to the town office, got to hear, ask questions, make sure they left with accurate information, rather than getting a letter, which could be misinterpreted? Up to you, just throwing it out there.
Maybe
my choice.
Because then you're going to be maybe missing some not-for-profit, somebody's not able to come. I think you have to do it a mass meeting, a media way.
I think they could probably find a representative from each not-for-profit to make it.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, we called around last year, and other towns do this fairly seamlessly.
Yeah, and
It is not a huge burden. I mean, if you want to be on the ballot, you submit an annual report. I mean, that's what you do. And there are some very clear letters out there that say, here's what you need to submit. And if a nonprofit doesn't, they don't go on the ballot.
And we don't have to do a lot of explaining to them at that point.
I mean, it really was, talking with towns around here that do that.
But they've been doing it for many, many years that way. I'm just thinking if this is something new, it may be nice to have a little face-to-face.
And
It is true that you've
towns
got-
around here don't have 13 agencies on their ballot.
Yeah.
Zero had something.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just wondering, since, for example, I do run the town's loan program, and when I speak with potential applicants, we often talk about what is the gist of the information that people need. I wonder if, maybe one thing that, sort of is recommended here is if we have a clear understanding of what it is, because I think there's a difference between what the select board needs to see versus what the voters need to see on a quick skim. So, we haven't had
vote yes on everything
example of
anyway.
something which is, the Putnam project's like fact sheet almost. Is that what you're asking from the agencies, almost like, what did you, like a line or two about what you did this year, your mission and what you accomplished this year, what your operating budget might be, and what percentage of that are you asking, or some other sources of funding? I'm just trying to understand, because if we have a better sense of that, it's actually not very difficult. We can put that kind of communication out to the agencies, we just need to know what it is.
I don't think we need an audited financial statement. We just need to have something along those lines.
Exactly.
And it should be very crisp. It's almost, as you're saying, we're the voters too. So the voters, what would the voter want to know? And maybe keep it in that context. And I think that could be done pretty easily.
I saw the information you collected from them, Stuart, last year. Both Tom and I saw it, and it was too much. It was a lot of information.
Previous boards had asked for 3 years, tax returns, all of that.
We failed to be as specific as we needed to be. And the problem is that this is really not, we are not granting them the funds, we are putting them on the ballot to then be voted on by people. So it feels to me like what we need is their budget, much in the same way, sort of a 1 or 2 page budget, much in the same way we get a 1 or 2 page budget from the library or some other entity like that, so that the voter can see what the general expenditures are and the general expenses are, and what portion of that the voters are being asked to pick up. And beyond that, it doesn't feel to me that we need much more. And if you look at an annual report of almost any nonprofit, that's the most you'd get from an annual report. You would not get who was being paid or what the different categories were, and all that stuff is far too much information for for us to be asking for, I think.
Yep.
That feels, especially since Stuart went through the effort of collecting it, and then we don't really use it.
Yeah, but we didn't ask the right questions last year, and I
Right.
think with Xerox suggesting we can get those questions, because the same things they're going to have to justify at the annual meeting, it's going to be right there in front of them. Here's what we do, here's what it costs us. Please give us some consideration.
Well, so given the time constraints, then I don't know if we need a motion on this, but I would say let's go forward with what Jeannie is saying we agreed to last year, which would be that if you're not increasing your amount, you go forward with the ballot item. If you're increasing your amount or you're new, you need to petition. And we will be asking for these 3 things from anyone that expects to be put on the ballot.
Sounds good?
And appear at the annual meeting?
Yep.
That's one of the 3
Okay,
things.
that's one of the 3, okay.
Yeah. Great. A letter of description, 1-page letter describing your, or a short description of your services.
And a report.
A short budget, that's sort of understandable.
2-minute
and then
presentation.
A short presentation at the annual meeting.
Perfect.
That's great.
Yeah, town
Perfect.
meeting.
Thank you.
But I would just say, I would like to really revisit this next year before we
Well, I
get
think we're going to
to
get
this point.
You're going to get to review this every year for the next item. See how it goes.
The sort of renewing thing, re-upping thing matters
Yes,
to me.
we got
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have one other point, just for the community's knowledge. The state of Vermont is planning a public outreach meeting on the PFOA situation, focusing mostly on the east end of town. It is scheduled for October 17th, which is a Wednesday, 6 p.m. at the middle school.
Great.
Which conflicts with the municipal planning grant meeting, unfortunately.
It's tough. We don't schedule these meetings.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should divide and conquer, or,
Yeah, you're talking about the form-based zoning meeting, yeah. But
that's a good-
I'm going to that one, I call that one, yeah.
yeah.
I'll be there. Somebody will be there. Divide and conquer. Thanks, Stu, and also for the information on the RBC installation. I think it's really important that the community understand and appreciate that this is our town employees that have basically implemented the RBC installation. It's a considerable savings.
Considerable savings.
And go ahead, you can share the amount, approximate amount.
Well, I think it was close to $1 million we
Yeah.
saved, which will allow us, because of these are bond funds, it will allow us to take some of those funds and attack several of the projects that we set aside when we looked at this. Remember, it was about $11 to $12 million project initially. Yeah. We pared it down to 9.85. We can start pulling in some of these other projects to do an upgrade now instead of waiting those 5 years or so.
Does the option exist to
Have the town.
help keep the costs down a little bit in the financing?
Well,
The impact that we're going to have on the taxpayers this year?
The only way you would do that is if we don't use these bond funds, we could use them to help pay back the first years.
Great.
So
it is
that's an option as
it's an
well.
option.
Yes.
Can I ask one more question on this timeline?
I just get really nervous at that increase.
Or is this not?
Timeline for?
Understood.
For the budget conversation?
No, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. So is this budget, so I guess 2. One is, where does BCIC fit into this budget timeline? And
BCIC is a contract, much as we contract with
Yeah.
BCRC for services.
Right.
The
But BCRC's in here.
Yeah, but that's in here because we pay dues, essentially, to belong to the Bennington County Regional Commission.
Mm-hmm.
We also contract with them for help with the solid waste district. We contract with them and their /partner BCIC for economic development services. Those are contracts which will appear in the budget, but we wouldn't look at them in the same fashion that we look at these as an outside agency. We'll have a contract proposal that'll come to you as part of that.
Okay. Okay. I'll leave it at that. And then, so at this point, will notice go out to everyone that's on this list of the timeline, like this week, so they have time?
We should
get
have
things
time. This is
together?
ready to go. We held it pending your review of it.
Okay.
So this is ready to go, and we will put together a letter detailing the requests and how you can avoid petitioning for the coming year.
Okay.
And that'll go out as well.
So the contract with BCIC, I guess, is still bothering me because it feels like how can we put a budget together when we don't know what we would be contracting with them for? Because the process thus far has been they've been part of that negotiation. So
We will know. As part of the budget, we will know what the contract is.
when will that happen in here?
That'll be part of the manager's budget to the select board.
So Jeannie, these first things are the agency requests, and the budget review is going to be a little further on when we do the budget meetings. And so when we do those budget meetings, we'll get the details from BCIC at that point.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that?
I guess it's just so that these entities know what's expected and when it is expected, so that Stuart can get it in a timely fashion and get it to us. That's the real crux of it, is some of these agencies, they say, we didn't know about it.
Pretty clear.
So we better make sure that BCIC
Okay.
or
Just
BCC.
feels like BCIC should be one of those.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
But BCIC isn't an agency
It's a contract.
looking for funding.
It's a contract.
On the ballot.
Contract, yeah.
Neither of these. These go into the budget.
It goes into the budget as another purchase service or a contracted service as part of the community development budget. That's where it will show up.
So these don't go on the ballot, they're part of the overall budget. That's why I'm confused. Because if BCIC, I'm saying, BCIC walked in and said, we want $90,000 this year, rather than $20,000, then that would be a surprise, and it wouldn't have been anticipated because...
Right. An easy answer, though.
It's an easy answer, though. Two-word answer?
We don't have any contracts with agencies. Those are just
Okay.
ballot items that are approved by the voters.
No, okay. Okay.
Tom?
Yes. Can we read the proclamation? Nice chair.
Thank you.
Thanks. I was looking at my checklist here. Go ahead.
So we have kind of approved this, but...
No, we haven't.
Was it not part of the consent agenda?
No, we're going to save that.
Oh, we're going to save it.
We have a proposed resolution relative to Rotary Week.
Okay.
Please proceed.
So we have a proclamation for Rotary Week, and it reads as follows. Whereas Rotary International is a worldwide organization with 1.5 million members dedicated to improving the lives of people around the globe, focusing its efforts on world peace, clean drinking water, and polio eradication. And whereas it has sought to form local clubs in all communities, encouraging these clubs to identify and fulfill the needs of the local community. And whereas the town of Bennington is fortunate to have two such clubs, the Catamount Rotary and the Bennington Rotary Clubs, both under the governance of Rotary District 7870, which provide an opportunity for service to Bennington's diverse membership. And whereas the clubs have completed many hands-on projects such as public garden projects, historic restorations, park projects, veterans care, children's literacy events, and fuel oil assistance. And whereas the clubs also conduct fundraising events to sponsor college scholarships for graduating high school students. Now therefore, we, the Bennington Select Board, do hereby proclaim that the week of October 22nd through 28th, 2018, shall be Rotary Week in Bennington, Vermont, dated at Bennington this 8th day of October, 2018.
Well read. All in favor of the proclamation as read, signify by aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor and no opposition to that resolution for these special clubs and all the services that they provide to this
It
community.
is circulating for your signatures.
Great. Other business before we have an executive session that we need to have?
I just want to make sure everyone saw on Front Porch Forum, there's a fire department open house on the 10th of October from 5 to 7 p.m.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Nothing.
I just want to recognize that our faithful employee, Pearl Burby's husband, Bruce, recently passed, and just would like the Select Board to, in passing, extend our condolences to her. And it was another battle with cancer, which we seem all too often to face. But Pearl's a special person, and it's always interesting to see her recipes in the town reports. Go ahead.
I haven't had a chance to welcome the Tri-State Area Federal Credit Union. I'm not sure if somebody did at the last meeting, but how great to have that new space opened up and ready for business in Bennington, right downtown. So that was wonderful.
It's a beautiful building.
Nice building, great building. It was a special thrill 2 weeks ago to have the Olympic athlete Jessie Diggins up at Prospect Ski Area and Sophie Caldwell. Jessie was the one that, of course, won America's first gold medal in cross-country skiing at the Olympics. And she came and she was wonderful. You could have heard a pin drop when she was describing the race and talking about what it was like. So it was a really special treat to have those two Olympic athletes right in our community. And I was going to echo what you said, Jeannie. You know, we do have this form-based zoning thing coming up. So on the 17th, BCIC is doing their meeting at Kappa from 5 to 7. It does conflict with the PFOA thing, but
pick and choose.
I'm going to be going to the form-based thing, but I feel very strongly about the PFOA, so I hope somebody will go to that too.
I'm going to go to the PFOA.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, so I have two things. One, this is next Tuesday, October 16th, at the middle school. I guess the high school and the supervisory union is holding a session to talk about Act 77 and flexible pathways and what that means, including a move away from grading to more proficiency-based assessment. So there will be 4 sessions, and it's really an opportunity for the community to come in and learn more about personalized learning plans, opportunities under like dual enrollment under flexible pathways, and also about proficiency-based assessment. So
what time?
It is 7 to 8:30 on Tuesday, October 16th, and that is at the middle school. So I think that's really important for our whole community. And then the following week, on Wednesday, October 24th at 6:15, Startup 802 is having a showcase, and that is a group of local entrepreneurs who have spent the last 7 weeks really fleshing out business ideas that they have. They'll have a showcase and also invited our Innovate 518, which is the Albany area equivalent. So we'll have entrepreneurs from the region coming in to talk about ideas they have, everything from food, from restaurants to indoor recreational activities to fine woodcraft. So lots of neat things. So that is Wednesday, October 24th, 6:15 at the community room at CCB.
That's where 802 is going to happen.
Yeah.
That's where the showcase will be. Yes.
I just have one thing. Saturday night, 6 o'clock at the high school is the Maya Football League, the senior team, the 5th and 6th graders, are hosting a semifinal game, first time in a long time that the youth have been under the lights at Spinelli, and the Micah cheerleaders will also be there. So a lot of young kids, for the first time playing under the lights, it's a semifinal game, chance to get into their league Super Bowl championship game if they win. So come out and support the young kids and our future Patriots.
Thanks, Chad. And just in case anyone's missed it, you also have a chance on Wednesday morning at the Bennington Museum for the Vermont Small Business Roundtable Series. It's at 8 till 9:30. It's to hear the entrepreneurs that have actually gone into business share their ideas about Vermont state policy and how it implements and affects them. So if anyone can get away for an hour and a half this Wednesday, it's at the museum. That's it. We need a motion to go in executive session for a couple of items that are not ready for public discussion.
Yeah, so to make a motion to go into executive session for litigation and a real estate conversation?
Yep.
Second.
All in favor? We are going. We're there.